I'm gonna kill all of you!
A girl named Thalia and her friends, Luke, Annabeth, and Grover, run toward a camp for half-bloods who are children of Greek gods. On the way, they get attacked by a monster, and since they won't make it through to the camp together, Thalia decides to stand back to fight. Unfortunately, she gets killed in the process, but her father, Zeus, honors her selfless act by turning her into a tree that will form a protective barrier to prevent monsters or intruders from entering the camp. Thalia's friends are shocked by this, and they eventually run into the camp when they see some monsters trying to bring down the protective barrier. Many years later, a boy named Percy Jackson looks ready to participate in a contest for half-bloods in the camp. As he's about to start, a girl named Clarice shows up next to him and jokes about how he came to watch her win. Percy finds this funny, and they both begin the contest. Shortly after,
How nice of you to show up just to watch me win.
Clarice tries to make Percy fall to the ground, but he retaliates and gets the upper hand. Even though he's really close to winning the contest, he sees a boy named Tarius asking for help because he's about to fall. Percy then decides to help him, and Clarice makes it to the top of the platform to win the contest. Percy ends up falling to the ground, and while his friends, Annabeth and Grover, try to carry him up, Clarice shows up and talks about how he's just a one-quest wonder who can't win anything else since he found Zeus's lightning bolt a few years back.
Don't listen to her, Percy.
You know, it's too late.
Annabeth seems pissed by Clarice's tone, and she mentions that Percy saved Olympus, and it's worth more than anything she has ever done. Clarice doesn't have a response to this, and she just walks away. Grover and Annabeth then tell Percy not to take what Clarice said seriously, but he says he's really starting to wonder if she's right. Just then, one of the guardians in the camp, Mr. D, shows up and says he needs Percy to do something for him. As his friends walk away, Mr. D tells Percy to sweep the arena where the contest was just conducted. After he's done,
You know, these events get a little messy.
Percy heads to the nearby river to heal himself with his power as a son of the sea god, Poseidon. While he's doing this, he calls on his dad and asks if he has ever thought that everything he achieved was purely based on luck. He adds that he's starting to believe that he only got Zeus Bolt because Annabeth and Grover were there to help him.
Makes you question whether you were all that good to begin with.
As he continues to doubt himself, Poseidon still doesn't show up to him, and he leaves. Shortly after, Percy is summoned to the Guardian's quarters, and his friends ask if he did anything that might have gotten him in trouble with Mr. D or another Guardian named Chiron. Percy says he didn't do anything, but as he gets to the quarters, he sees Chiron waiting for him. Percy says he didn't do anything wrong, and Chiron says he knows. He then mentions that he called Percy to inform him that he has a brother.
Hold on, you're saying Percy has a brother?
Even though it was previously believed that he's the only son of Poseidon. Percy and his friends are shocked, and as he asks if his brother is also half-blood, Chiron says he's not. As they enter the building, Chiron mentions that, unlike half-bloods who are half-humans, his brother is a sea nymph. Percy still doesn't understand this, but as Chiron takes him into Mr. D's office, he sees that his half-brother, Tyson, is a creature with one eye called a cyclops.
Hi, brother.
Even though Tyson looks happy to see his brother, Percy can't hide his shock because he didn't expect Poseidon's other son to be a cyclops. Shortly after, Tyson follows Percy to the cafeteria and he eats quite weirdly. Percy then asks Grover if he thinks Poseidon is just messing with him by sending Tyson to pose as his brother. Grover says it's unlikely and that even though Tyson is his half-brother, it's still better than having no brother at all.
Dad brought you here?
Tyson then interrupts them and says that he likes having a brother. He adds that Poseidon was the one who led him to the camp by showing him the directions with his trident. Almost immediately, Clarice comes over to their table and makes fun of Tyson's eye. She also jokes that Poseidon likely led Tyson to the camp when he saw that his other son was not good enough. Suddenly, Tyson says he can smell a bull nearby.
Smells like bull.
The others don't understand him, but the ground starts shaking. They eventually realize that there's someone trying to break through the camp's barrier. As all the half-bloods leave the cafeteria to see what's happening, Percy asks a boy named Chris if he's coming with them, but he says he'll stay back. Just then, the half-bloods see a colchis bull aggressively hitting the barrier repeatedly. Grover believes there's nothing to worry about because the barrier is very strong, but surprisingly, the bull breaks through and charges toward the half-bloods. This leaves everyone shocked and they run away before it crashes into them. As the bull starts attacking the half-bloods, Percy and Annabeth work together to try to defeat it, but it appears to be really strong. Clarice also tries to stab it, but the bull throws her off to hit a wall. Before it kills her, Tyson stands in front of it and holds it back. The bull then tries to burn Tyson alive, but nothing happens to him, and this leaves everyone shocked. After the bull gets loose again, Percy attacks it, but he's not strong enough to hold it back. As it tries to smash him, Percy throws his sword into the bull's mouth, and this gets it destroyed. While Percy is trying to stand up, a boy named Luke shows up and talks about how he shouldn't have destroyed the bull because it was hard to find. He also mentions that the next time Percy wants to drown a half-blood, he needs to confirm that the person can't swim.
Luke.
It turns out that a few years earlier, Luke went rogue and wanted to put everyone in danger by starting a war against the gods. But Percy stopped him and tried to kill him. Percy looks shocked to see that he's alive, and he realizes that Luke is the one who sent the bull to the camp. Luke then talks about how Percy is not the only half-blood who is hard to kill, as he says it's part of a prophecy. Percy asks what he means, and Luke says he can't believe Chiron hasn't told him yet.
You don't know.
He then mentions that the half-bloods are just a bunch of pawns to people like Chiron and Mr. D, who only want to control what they can do. As he adds that he's not the only half-blood who thinks so, he tells Percy to think about it too. After he teleports himself away from the camp, Percy looks confused about what he said. Meanwhile, Clarice asks Tyson how he was able to survive the bull's fire, and he says that cyclops are fireproof. He then asks how the bull was able to get through the barrier, and Annabeth realizes that Thalia's tree is dying.
Feels like she's dying all over again.
As they head over there with Chiron and Mr. D, they discover that the tree has been poisoned. Mr. D asks Chiron if the tree is okay, but he says it's dying. As Annabeth looks shocked and asks who could have done something like that, Percy shows up and says it was Luke. He adds that by summoning the bull, Luke has probably figured out that there are demi-titans that can help him get what he wants. As Clarice asks what he wants,
Yeah, well, I'm not the only one.
Chiron mentions that he wants them to be annihilated. Shortly after, while Chiron is trying to work on an antidote for the tree, Percy asks him about the prophecy Luke talked about. Chiron says the knowledge of it might be a burden for him, but Percy says he really wants to know. Chiron then tells Percy to go to the attic in his office to get the answers he wants. As he gets there, he sees the spirit of an oracle that calls herself the Speaker of Prophecies. He then tells her that he wants to know about the prophecy he's involved in.
I heard there was a prophecy about me.
Instead of going straight to the prophecy, the spirit tells him a story about a time when a titan named Kronos ruled the world. Kronos was so evil that he ate his own children, but 3 of his sons, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, managed to escape. They then worked together to destroy him and banish his remains to the depths of a place called Tartarus. However, the spirit mentions that Kronos is fated to rise again to exact his revenge on Olympus and the world. When this is about to happen, only one half-blood child of the 3 eldest gods will be able to defeat him. The spirit adds that it will all begin when the son of the sea and the lightning thief fight for an object called a golden fleece. Percy realizes that she's referring to him and Luke, and he looks shocked. The spirit also mentions that the half-blood of the eldest gods will reach the age of 20 despite all odds, and that he'll be left with the choice to save Olympus or destroy it.
I'm the spirit of Delphi.
After he leaves the attic, Percy goes to meet Chiron to talk about the prophecy. He then asks if there's a chance that he's not the one being referred to in the prophecy. Chiron says it's him because he's the only living half-blood son of one of the 3 oldest gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Percy sounds worried because he's not sure he'll be ready for the day he'll have to save Olympus, and Chiron admits that it's something to worry about.
That seems to be the question, doesn't it?
Elsewhere, while Annabeth is trying to find something that can heal Thalia's tree, she reads about the golden fleece and tells Grover that it's what they need. Grover says it's in a dangerous place, but Annabeth still suggests telling Mr. D about it. As they get to his office, they tell him about the golden fleece, and he says he's surprised that Grover wants to go on the quest because all satyrs like him have died trying to find it. Even though Grover is scared of going, Annabeth makes him tell Mr. D that he doesn't have a problem with the quest. Despite this, Mr. D says he's not going to allow it because the Golden Fleece is in the Sea of Monsters, or a place humans call the Bermuda Triangle.
It's a terrible idea.
Later that night, though, Mr. D sets up a meeting with all the half-bloods and mentions that he has a great idea that can save the tree. He then talks about the Golden Fleece's healing properties, and this leaves Annabeth shocked because he's stealing her idea. After a while, Mr. D announces that he'll be letting Clarice go on the quest to find it because she's currently the best warrior in the camp. He adds that she'll be accompanied by a satyr named Ichnute. Percy looks shocked to hear that he won't be going, and after the meeting, he calls Clarice to warn her about Luke. Clarice says she doesn't care and that he's just sad he's not going on the quest, as she adds that he needs to accept that he's no longer good enough. Percy looks sad and watches her leave. Shortly after, he sits alone and looks at the sword his dad gave him while thinking of another part of the prophecy in which the spirit talked about a cursed blade that can kill an evil soul. As he wonders what this means, he asks his dad for answers again, but he doesn't get a response.
Don't worry, camp will be okay.
A while later, Percy and Annabeth convince Grover to come with them to find the Golden Fleece before Luke does. On their way out, Tyson follows them and says he wants to come with them. Annabeth doesn't seem to like him, and she rejects his request, but he says he can be of help because the Golden Fleece is guarded by a cyclops named Polyphemus. As he mentions that he can talk to Polyphemus to try to get him to release the fleece, Grover thinks he'll be valuable to their team, so Percy agrees to let him come with them, even though Annabeth doesn't want this. She then gives him a sprayable mist to make his face look normal, but she tells him that he'll have to keep spraying it at intervals.
Mist?
Because it usually fades off. After he uses the mist, Annabeth calls a cab called the Chariot of Damnation to take them to Florida, because that's where Grover has tracked the fleece to. On the way, Percy and the others realize that the three women in the cab, including the driver, are blind, and this leaves them scared. As the driver continues to drive recklessly, one of the women sounds scared and says they might die, but another one mentions that it's impossible because Percy is supposed to be alive till at least the age of 20. Percy realizes that they know about the prophecy, and as he asks what they know, one of them tells him some numbers that she says he'll eventually need on his journey. Percy doesn't understand this, but as Annabeth mentions that she thinks they don't have enough money to pay for the cab, the three women drop them off in Washington, D.C. While they're walking around the city, Chris and some other half-bloods show up from a corner and kidnap Grover before disappearing from the scene. Percy looks shocked by this, but he tells Annabeth that Chris is likely working for Luke because he said something about other half-bloods who believe in what he's fighting for. Since they know that Luke has Grover, Percy wonders how they'll find him.
Luke has Grover.
Just then, Annabeth gets an idea and tells Percy and Tyson that they need to visit Luke's dad, Hermes, because he might be able to track his son. As they get there, Hermes initially stalls them with stories of how his son doesn't like him. He eventually decides to help them, and he gives Annabeth an artifact that can release the winds from the four corners of the earth when the cap is twisted. He also gives Percy a box sealer, which he calls a matter eliminator. As Percy wonders what he'll use it for, Hermes mentions that anything he outlines with it will disappear. After this, Percy learns that Luke is on a yacht called the Andromeda, and he just passed by a nearby beach. Before Percy leaves, Hermes tells him to beg Luke not to be angry at the world for his dad's mistakes.
They'll never make it.
After Percy and the others leave, they see Luke's yacht already moving further away. Since they're close to the water, Tyson suggests calling on their dad to help them. He then calls on Poseidon to send them something to use to chase down Luke's yacht. As Percy says that Poseidon won't answer him, he suddenly sees a sea creature called a hippocampus heading toward them. Percy is shocked by this, but he and the others eventually head toward the yacht with the hippocampus. As they get close to it, they sneak on board and try to find Grover. Unfortunately, they're caught by a monster on the yacht, and as Chris and some of Luke's other soldiers see them, they're taken to meet Luke. When they see him, Luke says he finds it interesting that they came to his yacht. Percy asks for Grover, but Luke says he has sent him ahead to the Sea of Monsters with some of his friends. Percy asks if he's not just trying to stop them from getting the fleece, but Luke says he also needs it. He adds that he's trying to revive something that isn't a tree.
I need it to.
As Percy and the others look confused, Luke shows them that he has retrieved Kronos' remains from Tartarus. Annabeth can't believe he's really trying to destroy the world to get back at his dad, but Luke says that the Olympians overthrew their parents, and it's just their turn to do the same. Percy tells him what Hermes said, but Luke seems pissed that his dad couldn't tell him by himself. As Luke's soldiers are about to lock Percy and the others in the yacht's brig, Annabeth reminds Luke that Thalia was his friend, and he shouldn't let her tree die. Luke then says she can't lecture him about Thalia because she's hanging out with a cyclops.
You disappoint me the most.
After they're taken to the brig, Annabeth tells Percy that she doesn't trust Tyson because cyclops are usually vicious and dangerous. Percy doesn't think Tyson is dangerous, and he says that they need to find a way to leave the yacht. Almost immediately, he uses his powers and manages to get hold of his bag. He then takes the matter eliminator and uses it to free himself from the cell he was locked in.
Just like Hermes said.
After he frees Annabeth and Tyson, they sneakily head out to the top of the yacht. Chris sees them leaving, and Percy decides to fight him, while Tyson and Annabeth get the lifeboat so they can leave with it. Percy eventually knocks Chris out of the yacht, and Annabeth gets the lifeboat into the sea with Tyson. Before Percy can enter the lifeboat, Luke shows up and tells him to join his team. He adds that Percy can't escape the prophecy, and he needs to let them get revenge on their parents for how they've always ignored them. Just as Percy rejects his offer,
I think I'll pass.
Tyson mistakenly drops the lifeboat's engine into the water. Annabeth looks pissed, but she eventually remembers the artifact Hermes gave her, and as she uses it to get away from the yacht, it generates enough power to move the boat. Percy then escapes from the yacht, but Luke follows him. Before he can get close, Percy knocks him off into the water. After this, he enters the lifeboat and heads toward the Sea of Monsters with Annabeth and Tyson. On the way, Annabeth tells Tyson to reapply the mist because his face is back to normal. As he tries to do this, he realizes that he has run out of the mist. This makes him sad, but Percy tries to cheer him up by giving him Hermes' artifact so he can control the boat's movement. Tyson cannot believe this, and he says that no one has ever trusted him with anything because when they look at him, all they see is a monster. As he says he's starting to believe he's won, Percy tells him not to be hard on himself.
Don't be so hard on yourself.
Following this, Percy goes to sit next to Annabeth, and she talks about not trusting Tyson. Percy says he doesn't get why she has a problem with Tyson, and Annabeth mentions that Thalia was actually killed by a cyclops. Percy sounds shocked and says sorry to her because he didn't know earlier. Shortly after, Tyson drops the artifact into the water, just as they get to the Sea of Monsters. Unfortunately, they get sucked into the stomach of a really large sea monster.
Smells like the stomach.
After a while, they hear Clarice's voice nearby, and they start looking for her. They then see that her ship also got sucked into the monster's stomach. As she sees them, she looks shocked and talks about what happened to her ship. Percy then hears a loud crushing sound, and as he asks what it is, Clarice says that the things inside the monster's stomach get crushed after a while. Percy looks scared of this, and as Clarice talks to her crew members to get the ship working, he realizes that they're zombies. Suddenly, the chain holding the ship from drifting away snaps in two. As the ship moves toward the part of the stomach where food gets crushed, Percy comes up with an idea to get them out. After shooting a part of the monster's stomach, Clarice steers the ship out to the surface of the sea. Percy and the others are happy to have made it out, but Tyson mentions that he hasn't seen Ichnuti. Clarice then says he died while trying to fight a sea monster.
Hey, where's Ignite?
Shortly after, Clarice instructs her crew on where to steer the ship in their search for the fleece. Suddenly, Percy sees map lines inside the sea, and as he tries to decode where they should be headed, he realizes that the numbers the blind woman gave him earlier are coordinates. Following this, he tells Clarice to change the ship's course, and she agrees. After a while, they see an island up ahead, and Tyson says it's where Polyphemus lives.
Find us a place to dock.
They eventually stop there and see that it's an amusement park on an island. After looking around for a while, they hear a loud growl coming from inside a tunnel for a ride called Plummet of Death. They then go inside and use the ride to reach the end of the tunnel. While looking around, they see Polyphemus scattering things around and complaining to Grover that he hasn't had a half-blood to eat in a while. After he goes to sit down, Percy and the others call Grover to come to their side. As he sees his friends, Grover looks really happy and explains that he's disguising himself as a female cyclops because Polyphemus is half-blind and he can't see clearly.
I'm having a really bad day.
He adds that he has been trying to stay alive long enough to figure out how to get the fleece off of Polyphemus. Percy asks if he has an idea already, and he says he does. He then tries to distract Polyphemus while Percy attempts to steal the fleece. Before he can do this, Polyphemus smells that there are half-bloods in his cave, and he attacks Percy and the others. Tyson then shows up and tries to get Polyphemus to leave them since they're both cyclops. However, Polyphemus doesn't listen to him, and he slaps Tyson to the ground. After a while, Percy eventually gets hold of the fleece, and he escapes from the cave with the others before locking it to prevent Polyphemus from leaving. Unfortunately, it turns out that Luke and his soldiers are already waiting for them to bring the fleece out of the cave.
It's nice work. I really appreciate it.
Luke then tells Percy to give it up, but he says he can't. As Luke shoots an arrow at him to kill him, Tyson stands in its way and gets shot instead. Percy is shocked by this, and as Tyson is about to fall down a cliff into a river, he says he knows that his brother would have done the same for him. Percy looks devastated by this, but Luke blames him for making him shoot the arrow. As he gets hold of the fleece, he tells Percy and the others that they're lucky to be there to witness the return of Kronos. While they're tied up, Annabeth tells Percy that they can't let Luke revive Kronos. Percy still looks devastated about Tyson's death, and he says he never even got to call him brother. He adds that Luke eventually got the fleece off of him, and that Olympus will get destroyed, just like the Oracle said. Annabeth tells him to forget about the Oracle because he can rewrite his destiny and make sure Tyson doesn't die for nothing.
You're worried about your destiny? Then write a new one.
Clarice also agrees with this, and Percy decides to do something. As Luke places the fleece on Kronos' remains, Percy gets his sword and frees his friends. He then gets past Luke's soldiers and tries to get the fleece off of Kronos' remains, but Luke holds him back as he tries to kill Percy. Tyson shows up and throws Luke to the ground. Percy is shocked by this, but Tyson shows him that the water in the river healed him. Percy is happy about this, and he hugs Tyson while calling him his brother. Almost immediately, Kronos' remains break out of its prison, and Percy and Tyson get thrown off to the ground. Following this, Kronos' body starts forming up again until he regains his full strength. Luke then goes to welcome him, and Kronos lifts him off the ground while calling him his favorite. Surprisingly, Kronos throws Luke into his mouth and swallows him, and this leaves the others shocked.
My favorite.
As they run away, Percy waits back to face Kronos with his sword. Unfortunately, Percy gets stopped by a monster, and as he struggles to get past it, Kronos swallows Grover. Percy eventually gets past the monster and cuts one of Kronos' legs with his sword. Suddenly, this part of his body returns to his prison, and Kronos realizes that Percy is holding the cursed blade. As it starts glowing, Percy also realizes this, but before he does anything else, Kronos attacks him. He loses the sword in the process, but before Kronos grabs it, Percy holds on to it. As Kronos picks him up, he says that Percy's destiny has been written long ago. Kronos then tries to crush Percy, but he breaks free and says that he writes his own destiny. Almost immediately, he stabs Kronos and tears him open. Luke gets freed, but he lands inside Polyphemus' cave while he's looking hungry. Grover also gets released, and Kronos' remains return to his prison. Percy then looks at his sword and thanks his dad for giving it to him.
Thanks, Dad.
As Annabeth is about to run toward Percy, one of Luke's monsters stabs her. Percy quickly runs to help her, and Grover works with Clarice to kill the monster. Unfortunately, Annabeth looks badly hurt, and as she talks about dying, Percy collects the fleece from Tyson and uses it to revive her. The fleece works quite well, and Percy looks happy to see Annabeth alive again. Annabeth then thanks Tyson for sacrificing his life for Percy earlier when Luke shot him. She adds that she doesn't think he's vicious and dangerous anymore, and he thanks her for this. Shortly after, Percy gives the fleece to Clarice and says she deserves to hold it when they get to the camp because it was her quest. Clarice looks happy about this, and when they return to the camp, she places the fleece on the tree's root, and this makes the barrier appear again. A while later, Percy tells Chiron that he's happy to have gotten the whole prophecy thing behind him. Chiron then mentions that the oracle's prophecy might have been about another event, and not the one that happened on Polyphemus's island. Percy then says he's just happy because he has realized that having a destiny may not be as bad as he thinks. The next day, while Percy is eating in the cafeteria, Grover comes over to tell him that Annabeth just saw something while she was watching the tree. Percy then follows him to the tree and sees that the fleece has brought Thalia back to life. As he pulls her out of the root with Grover and Annabeth, Thalia asks who he is, and he says he's Percy. She then mentions that she just had a weird dream about dying, and Percy asks for her name. As she says she's Thalia, daughter of Zeus, Percy looks shocked and wonders if the prophecy wasn't about him after all. Despite initially having doubts about his ability to replicate his success in finding Zeus' lightning bolt, Percy eventually saved Olympus and the world from the wrath of Kronos. Interestingly, Luke didn't get what he wanted, and he ended up in Polyphemus's cave, where he'll have to deal with the hungry cyclops. On the other hand, Percy thought he had fulfilled the prophecy, but it turns out that Thalia might be the one who gets to choose whether to save or destroy the world.